working in this non-linear way where you're creating images and then you're taking a word to punctuate and describe the image. Again, it gets your sort of your creative unconscious or your parts of your autonomic nervous system to get fired. And so you get answers from this deeper self. And as you know, from being a writer, writers suffer horribly from self-esteem issues, from doubt, self-criticism. And this practice, what I'm finding, and I found this over the pandemic, is when you do the practice, your self-confidence goes up tremendously because you're having a pure moment of creation, even though it's only a couple minutes long. And it gets increasingly harder for you to continue to doubt and condemn yourself.
Are you curious about discovering ways of making your life better? Then welcome to my podcast. I'm Bob Nickman, and this is The Exploding Human. Listen in while I talk with all kinds of people in the fields of personal growth, health and healing, alternative therapies, psychology, spirituality, environment, and the future. I'm looking for those answers that make life better for everyone. You'll meet cutting-edge practitioners, doctors, artists, filmmakers, business people, and those who have overcome challenges, the brave, the curious, anyone who is out there helping us humans to explore, expand, and explode.
Hey, welcome to The Exploding Human. My name is Bob Nickman. My guest today is Marilyn Horowitz. She is an award-winning author, a New York University professor, TV show creator, and a writing coach, and she's developed something called Word of the Day, which we're going to be talking about. It is a technique she created to help her writing students. However, it is expanded into something else, which is something that anyone can use to better themselves in every area of their life, not just creativity, but health and well-being. Marilyn has studied quite a few disciplines, which she's going to be talking about, from yoga to shamanism. Just as a personal interest, she's a voracious reader and, of course, an accomplished writer. This is a fascinating topic because a lot of what she is able to do with this technique and help people to do is to work with some of the things that happen to them in childhood trauma, and personal difficulties to access a part of the mind that talking cannot reach. She has really developed a technique to tap into inner wisdom and intuition. She's going to take me briefly through that process, as well as some amazing success stories. So let's get to it. This is Marilyn Horowitz. Good afternoon, Marilyn. I am so happy you're here.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm really, really appreciative.
Yeah, and we had such a nice talk before, and both of us coming from a writing background. This should be a lot of shorthand, but folks, you'll understand because we'll be expressive because we're writers.
One hopes.
I know that you have a nice history of writing and for television and film and producing and all these kinds of things, but you're doing something else.
Yes.
It's not exactly the show business route. It's a healing piece to using writing. Can you explain it to our fans out there?
I'll give you. It's probably, I'm a writer, so I would say 25 words, but it'll probably be 50. I'll do my best. All right. It's the old letter from Thomas Jefferson. I'm sorry I couldn't write you a shorter letter, right? So I'll do my best to be brief. But basically, what happened to me was when I was in my 20s, I was very lucky. I wrote this novel about a serial killer and his sister, and I went to a party. And some guy said to me, hey, baby, my best friend's a producer. And I was like, yeah. But the guy was, and I finished the book on a Friday, went to the party on a Saturday, and I sold it to the movies on Sunday. It sounds like it should have been, the great Hollywood discovery story, right? Well, a year later, 30 drafts later, because this book was a howdunit. It was really a psychological study about, it was a mystery with lots of, gore in it, but it was basically, the subtext was, it was about how violence is bred in the generations. It's about 3 generations of people. So at the end of this thing, I had written him 30 drafts, and it had gone from being a howdunit to a whodunit, and you met the killer at the end for 10 minutes or whatever. So I got an education, or let's say a baptism by fire, and you have written for Hollywood, so you know exactly what I'm talking about. But I survived, and I had a dream the night before they were going to take my story away and give it to another writer, and in which Joseph Campbell, the great mythologist, appeared to me in my dream up a tree, and he said, well, that's where you are, metaphorically, so what can I do for you? And I said, well, the only thing I do worse than writing is reading maps. How about a map? Couldn't go down any lower, right? So I woke up and I drew these 12 circles, and they turned out to be a vastly simplified, very easy to use version of the hero's journey that perfectly mirrored all of the Hollywood narrative movies that were fashionable at that time. Now, history on that is both my father and my grandfather were both general counsel for Columbia Pictures. I come from a movie business background, so it wasn't that surprising that I would figure this out. And I'd spent my childhood, reading and watching movies. So I took this thing, and it turned out to be a Rosetta Stone between actual experience and movie writing. And so I was hired by NYU when they started their studies, and I ended up working at NYU grad, and I taught my book, which I created based on this method, to thousands of people, and everybody could write a story. And you, because of our conversation, understand about the pattern recognition thing. Everybody is a story expert. They just don't know it. And you have to repurpose it, right? Anybody who's lied about their homework is an expert, And so that was my basis. And I could never use the experience part of the Mythic Journey map because I was a screenwriting professor. So I kind of tabled that. Had a very, very long, successful career as a writing coach, a private coach. Teaching was my hobby. And then when the pandemic hit, a lot of my writers were just like in a terrible state because, we're used to sheltering at home, right? That's what writers do. But then everybody else was staying home with us, and that made it very crazy making. And so this technique, the word of the day technique, which is a journaling technique, I had developed for my private students because a lot of people I work with were very high powered, very busy, and had to do things like go into pitch meetings in 2 days and deliver a full concept. And these techniques that I had developed, because I had studied the brain, just my hobby, consciousness in the brain, I knew how people's eyes worked. I knew how the brain fluid works. I knew how to get dopamine to do certain things. And so I was able to lay out these graphic designs that would get people to kind of create stories. I never talked about it because I'm just a teacher, but I'm smart and I knew about this stuff. So I took out the word of the day and I started having these free webinars for writers during the pandemic. And I got a lot of people would come and they would calm down, because it's a technique where basically what it is you take a circle, you put a circle in the middle of the page, you breathe a little bit, have a couple stretches that you can do, and then you have a word come into your mind, like serendipity or popcorn or whatever it is. No matter what it is, it's because because I've relaxed you in a certain way, it's coming straight out of your creative unconscious onto the page. And so there you are now connected with a part of your brain that you can't usually get at without meditating or doing some kind of procedure. You're instantly there. And then you set a timer, and for a minute or two, you free associate. But my whole thing is that you need to work from the concept, the physical image back to the word, especially when you're doing dramatic writing, as you know from writing TV. It's so much easier if you can see it and then you describe it, as opposed to describing it and then seeing it.
Yeah, sure.
And you're you, so it's a big duh for you. But most people don't know that this is a much better way to work. So we would do this, and after an hour, people would get off this thing, and they were really happy. And I thought, wow, there's something going on here. So I danced tango for fun, and my friend Barnaby, who I dance, his name is Barnaby Rue. He's a famous artist and a shaman who runs. Are you familiar with Brody Man? You know the Brody Man?
Yeah, I know about it. Sure.
Right. So anyway, he's had a camp there for 17 years. And when everybody goes and has their psychedelic transformative experiences and are freaking out, they come to his camp to get some shaman calming. So he said, and we're dancing tango one night. And he goes, Marilyn, I don't think you're a teacher. I think you're a healer. And I dare you to come and do healing work in my camp in Burning Man. Don't dare me. And so there I was. And I studied shamanism. I knew it wasn't my thing, but I knew all about it. And after my experience of actually getting people to calm down and get healed at Burning Man, I realized that this technique had a broader base. But by that time, the book that I'd written, which was called Word of the Day, How to Transform Your Writing in 15 Minutes a Day, was already being published. So this sort of larger way of working with it sort of came afterwards. So to make my point about this is that we need to make meaning. And it's what we were talking about before we started. So the word of the day is a technique. This particular book is aimed at people who are writers. But at this point, in my opinion, everybody who has ever sent a text message is a writer. I mean, the whole world has changed. That's what we do. We all write to each other, and Chinese medicine says, a picture's worth more than 1,000 words. And I think it's true. So this is a 15-minute practice. It's 5 minutes in the morning, and you get up and you do what I described, which is hopefully you've made a circle in your pad by the side of your bed, or you bought the book, which is coming out in a couple of weeks, on Amazon, and you use it's a workbook, so it has all the circles set up for you and everything. And you do a technique, and I'm going to teach you the technique in a second if you're open to that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you do that for a couple of minutes. Then you do a second one for another literally 2 minutes, and then you write something. And the things that come out are so amazing, and they are transformative to people because you're able to work with this other part of your brain. As I say, I've set this all up so that things happen that are not supposed to happen. So it's a 30-day practice, and the idea is in the morning you work on your creative stuff, and in the evening you review your day and you think about how much stuff you've done of your creative work that you want to do, whether it's cooking or golf or writing, whatever it is, and working in this non-linear way where you're creating images and then you're taking a word to punctuate and describe the image. Again, it gets your sort of your creative unconscious or your parts of your autonomic nervous system to get fired, and so you get answers from this deeper self. And as you know from being a writer, writers suffer horribly from self-esteem issues, from doubt, self-criticism. And this practice, what I'm finding, and I found this over the pandemic, is when you do the practice, your self-confidence goes up tremendously because you're having a pure moment of creation, even though it's only a couple minutes long. And it gets increasingly harder for you to continue to doubt and condemn yourself.
That in itself is enormous.
Well, that's what I'm up to because, the writing technique that I told you about it was the result of my being tortured by this Hollywood producer. Basically helped thousands of people write a screenplay in 10 weeks or less that was cogent, that was was readable, well-structured. And people would say, well, what about talent? And I'd say, well, what about it? That's not my department, craft. And this was because, as I told you, I discovered early that people are natural storytellers and that people also suffer from not being able to finish things. So I cannot tell you how many hundreds of people would say to me, wow, Marilyn, I never thought I could finish anything. And of course, that transforms your life. You can no longer say that I don't finish things because you do.
And one of the obstacles to finishing things is that you don't think it's good. So you don't finish it because you don't want to hear that it's not good. So if you'll never hear it if you don't finish.
My friend who's a painter has a class at NYU, and he takes people outside and they paint in plein air, and then when they're done, they all go, "Oh, this is horrible. I want to destroy it." He goes, "No, leave it with me for a week." They go back the next week and they look at it and they go, "Hey, this wasn't so bad. What happened?" And this is his punchline that was great. He said, "It's because you forgot what the idea was."
Mm. That's great, yeah.
And so the idea is that that's a lot of what I'm up to. So I think that we all suffer from self-criticism, self-doubt. I think that this whole the whole last 50 years of this tradition of self-esteem, the pursuit of improving your self-esteem, increasing self-esteem, is incredibly destructive because basically what you're doing is you're mirroring the societal judgment of yourself inside yourself. Half of my creative work and the reason I've been so successful is getting people to sort which part of their thinking is theirs and which part isn't theirs. It's not that easy.
No, it isn't.
And so the word of the day, a lot of the new modalities, including mine, basically go right to the heart of things. In other words, the part of you that needs to have the experience of creating is not your mind. It's not your brain, which are two separate parts of you, your left brain, right brain, all the stuff they talk about. There's this place inside your head, which I call the stronger self, that has both things cooking. And, when you write and you're in the zone and you're writing, that's the part of you that's working. It's almost like someone's talking to you and you're writing it down, right?
Yeah, it's coming from a place you can't describe, really. It's just kind of happening to you almost. When you're in it, and I always liked that look of my wife used to not like this, but when I'd come out of my office with that look on my face, because I wasn't actually in my office. I was physically, but I was somewhere else. And it's hard to shake it off right away. You can't. You're still living in the world that you're dreaming of while you're coming up with stuff. And she'd go, "What's wrong with you?" I just go, "I'm a writer. What can I tell you? I'm not out of it yet."
What's wrong?
It
with you?
also
I'm a-
means I don't care about you.
Ah!
That's the part I wouldn't say because one, it's not true, but it would have been funny.
Well, well, yeah, but you're, I mean, you're a comedian, but also in that moment you didn't because you weren't even on the planet. It had nothing
Right.
to do with her.
I didn't at that moment. I was somewhere else. I was traveling.
Exactly. You're in your space. So, so I thought that it was very important that people start to have control over that. Because I went through a traditional, a Freudian psychoanalysis, and I was told that's the royal road to the unconscious is through dreams. And I was like, F that. I want to do it while I'm awake. I want to ride that tiger.
Yeah, sure.
I don't want that tiger to bite me while I'm asleep, right? So that's really sort of the subtext of what I've been doing all these years. And so what happened with the writing system, and the book is called How to Write a Screenplay in 10 Weeks, if anybody is looking. I just had a student who used it very successfully and has just got funding for her indie feature, I'm happy to report, is that we don't create things in language. And that's really the tragedy of the way writing is taught. In other words, the words need to come after the images. And so what the word of the day does is, without talking about that, it trains you because it takes you right to the place where your image making is, which is in sort of, somewhere between your right and your left brain. There's this part of you that I call the stronger self, which is your GPS. It's related to your autonomic nervous system. It's why you don't trip over things when you're walking down the street. But the idea that you sit down every morning before you get out of bed, you spend a minute connecting with that part of you. No matter what you do, you're going to feel a lot better about yourself because you've plugged into you, And the personal growth aspect of this is having been a coach for many years and had to get people's lives organized so they could deliver their stuff on time. What I discovered is this is my analogy. It's like we're all little toasters and we have a plug and we know we have to plug in somewhere to get ourselves to work. And we're taught to go and look for the plug. Oh, are you going to be my partner? Or, are you going to be my boss? Or are you my parent, my friend? Can I plug into you? Can I get my juice from you? And of course, my answer is that the plug goes right in your own heart.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the problem with all of these modalities that are currently being fashionable, is they don't teach that, because if they taught that, you wouldn't need them. In other words, once you make that connection and you realize that, my definition of happiness is deeming yourself worthy of having it. And I think that's the inner work that needs to be done. None of this other stuff. I mean, in other words, yes, trauma and the past and the present and the future and what you're doing affects that. But the core thing, it's like when you're on an airplane and the attendant is describing what happens when the air mask comes down. And they say, if you have little kids, you still have to put the mask on yourself first. And it's the same analogy as a toaster. We spend all of our lives putting our mask on other people, hoping that will give us air.
Yeah.
And this is the fundamental center of all the work I've been doing my whole life, because I understand that. And I am, of course, my own worst student. So, I have to work harder to get myself, not to beat myself up. So I think if I can do it with myself, then I can certainly do it with other people. So so the word of the day has several aspects to it. One is it's really easy to do. You can't do it wrong except if you don't do it, right? Second thing is you're in control. It takes a piece of paper and a pen and a timer of any kind you have. So it's low tech, very easy to use. And if you are persistent, what starts to happen is that because you have created something, and we're all creative. So this is, it's great if you're a writer or a painter or a musician, but we're all creative. In other words, if we could acknowledge that and work for that, then the word of the day can be used for almost any problem, because the idea is you connect so deeply with yourself so easily that by the time you get out of bed, you're connected, right? And then the practice is you go into the bathroom or if you're in bed, and if you'll do this with me, it's a little corny, okay? But like, take a deep breath.
Well,
okay?
I'm a fan of corny.
All right. Well, you're
even
gonna
though
love
I'm a
it.
total hipster, I am a big fan of corny, because the reason it's corny is because people have done it a lot, because it usually works. It's like cliches. Same thing. There's
right,
cliches because there's some truth behind them for the most part. Yeah. All right.
Well, so let's do the technique. So it's very simple. So you're just going to take a deep breath and give yourself a little stretch of any kind.
All right.
See where you're tense.
A couple things popped, including both.
Yeah, there you go. Roll your shoulders, twist around, but breathe.
Comfortable.
We stop breathing. Breathe.
All right.
All right. Then settle now, settle on your sit bones. Yeah, definitely that.
Okay.
Good.
I'm a big fan
And
of
then,
the lion's breath, is what they call it.
oh,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I love it. A
Okay.
part of, I mean, this is outside the country, but I'm certified in Dao Yin, which is Taoist yoga. So I teach that as a matter of my courses. So for this one, we can do a little bit of this before we start. So even though it's a podcast, what you're doing is you're going to put your hands on your head and you're going to stroke your head backwards 9 times and breathe. 1, 2, relax and smile. 3, 4, inhale, exhale. 5, inhale, exhale. 6, inhale. 7, exhale. 8, 9. All right, that was much better, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then stretch your arms out and give yourself a big hug and smile. Hands on your shoulders, a bigger hug. There you go. Okay, drop your chin a little bit, relax, smile.
Okay.
Smiling sends a jolt of dopamine. And then you're going to close your eyes or you can look in the mirror and you're going to say, I love you, and say your name. So I'll say, I love you, Marilyn. You're going to say, I love you, Bob.
Okay. I love you, Bob.
We'll always be together.
We'll always be together.
And we'll always be safe.
And we'll always be safe.
Okay, have a smile, give yourself a squeeze.
Okay.
And then just relax. See how good you feel?
Yeah, it's great.
Isn't that corny?
Yeah, the I love you with your name. Yeah, I it's corny, but it's, be kind to yourself is a powerful thing.
Okay, so but what you're experiencing now, and it's the smiling that does this. This is neuroscience. It sends a shot of dopamine. So in this moment, you are in a state of complete self-acceptance on an experiential level. And a lot of people describe this feeling as, when they pray or when they meditate and they really feel connected to the creator or whatever they're up to. You just did it in 1 second by closing your eyes and saying 3 dumb things. All right, so that's a lot of what I'm about. So the idea is in the space that you're in,
Mhm.
if you now go and you do a word of the day or you want to work on a project, you see how you're going to flow because you're right in the zone. Isn't that cool?
Yes. Folks, try this. I mean, you could follow along, rewind and listen to that and try it because it's pretty cool. Very
Yeah, I
cool.
got lots of stuff. If they go to my website, which is marilynhorowitz.com, I got all kinds of free stuff. And, I do webinars. We do the practice.
There you go. You don't even have to listen to rewind, just marilynhorowitz.com.
So anyway, so what you would do now is you would do a cluster. And if you want to do one, and again, it's hard to do on a podcast, but what word comes into your mind? We'll do it orally.
Pernicious.
I love that. See, now you're a writer. I always get these big, like, $5 words. All right.
You want me to do a small one?
No, I like the pernicious, but let's talk about this. What does pernicious mean to you?
It means something that is aggressive and sneaky and does not go away.
And what image comes into your mind?
Kind of a knife, like a needle almost, like something poking.
Fantastic. All right. So, but now you see how you arrived at that image?
Yeah.
It's beautiful. Now the practice is you do a couple of these clusters and you come up with 4 or 5, and then you would write about this. So if I said, because we're writers, so I said, okay, so Bob, what does pernicious and knife make you think of? What would you say? Well, because it's like you're writing, but you're writing in the air. What would you say?
Oh, it's what I would. It makes me think of somebody that is really trying to control me or a situation in a way that isn't loving, in a way that's not loving.
And I thought of Mac the Knife, the Bertolt Brecht character.
Yeah, and the great song. I think didn't Bobby Darin sing that? I think he made big bucks singing Mac the Knife.
Big bucks. Now, the reason that I'm happy that you did this is now, you see, if you were doing a writing gig and you needed to come up with a character real quick, you just did it.
Yes.
You get that, right?
I completely get it. And, I've always written out a character first. That's always the way I've done it. I can picture and feel the person that I'm writing about. That's what I do basically. Like, what's it like to be that guy, because you get to live all of life without any of the consequences when you're coming up with this kind of stuff.
But you see how your imagination got going? Because I can see, even though, this is a podcast, I can see in your mind, you can see this guy. You've cast him as a Bobby Darin kind of guy. He's got slicked down hair. He looks a bit, you could now go put him in his story right now.
Absolutely.
That's what Word of the Day is about for writers. It's that cool and it's that fast.
It was interesting that because I did feel relaxed and really good about myself. And yet the word I came up with was not one of, it wasn't like, peace or love or any of that kind of stuff. It was completely, almost the complete opposite. It was, so it doesn't, what I'm saying is it doesn't have to be in line with the, the sort of loving higher self kind of thing.
I am completely opposed to positive thinking. I think it is one of the most, I think it's one of the most, the most oppressive, it's like if you have a bad thought, oh my God, I'm a bad person, cancel. I got to get this thought out of my mind. So no, but what you did is there's obviously something, and we were talking about writing in the industry before, and we were talking about a lot of pernicious, nasty things.
Oh yeah.
And you told me something, personal about yourself, which I'm not going to repeat on here. But the point is that the description of what you were talking about could be described as people who were pernicious. And so what happened when you did the Word of the Day, because you felt safe with you, and that's the whole game. In other words, it's all about being so safe with yourself. And if you ever watch one of my webinars, you have a group of 10 or 15 people, and everybody is in that space you're in for the hour. We're all in a space where we're willing to create with this kind of courage.
Yeah.
But because something about, again, I don't know how, I can explain the brain science to you, but it doesn't answer the question. There's something magic about this being in a safe space with a facilitator who knows how to do this, where your people are willing to come out with the most amazing things. In my last webinar, people were coming out with these paragraphs, poems, because what you did was you got connected with your creative unconscious where you're not afraid. And you didn't feel any need to be positive, and you weren't dealing with, MDR and personal growth. You were dealing with a straight person on the other side of the coin that's saying, "Hey, let's see what you're up to." And this technique's powerful because if you have to create characters, you can do it this fast. If you need to do plot elements, you use the Word of the Day. You do it a little differently. The applications for this particular way of getting into that part of your brain are endless. You can use it for relationships, for grief, a lot of things.
What I love about it is that, like you said, it's safe, and there's no right and wrong. That's what makes it safe. So if there's nothing right or wrong, whatever comes up is right, or wrong. It doesn't really matter. It's what comes up. So
you see, we've taken the self-esteem mirror out of your head. You're not measuring your performance.
Yeah, I have this thing that I'll just tell you about it. When I wake up in the morning, and you're not when you wake up, you're not completely up yet. It takes a while to get going into whatever you want to call reality, or the waking state. But I've had this for years. I come up with a name. It just comes in my head, and I say it out loud. And I've always been fascinated with names as a way to like when I hear a name, I picture a person. I picture a type of person. And so I've been doing this for years. And I don't try to do it. It just happens. And it's become kind of, maybe it's a habit now, but I just love to say a name, and then I say it and I'll laugh, or I'll go, I'll have a feeling about this name that I've come. I never do anything with it, but it's just something I like.
But why don't you try now for doing Word of the Day with it? In other words, you're the perfect candidate. In other words, you wake up, you put this guy's name in the circle, and then you take a breath and you go for 2 minutes thinking of the things about this person.
Yeah. Then I'd have to write, which I don't want to do anymore.
You don't have to write. You don't have to write 4 words.
I'm just being silly.
But I'm a writer, so I feel you.
Oh yes, I had a friend. He just passed away. He used to say, the expression, I hate writing, but I love having written.
Yes.
He used to say, I hate writing and I hate having written. He goes, I can't not do it, but it just brings me so much, yeah, well, let's use the word solace.
It's a technical term.
And he was such a great writer. I mean, he was just delightful.
Well,
His other great one is people always give me praise me for the way I write women, and he goes, and I write women not how they are, but how the women like to think of themselves that they are. Because so I'm really dishonest, but women really like it.
I get that. But you might try this and see what happens. In other words, suddenly you might find that you're writing a new book or a novel or something you never thought of before.
Yeah.
I mean, this is powerful stuff. And the fact that you have this amazing habit, why not make it a little more amazing? Give yourself a minute and a piece of paper. I want to tell you a couple of other stories about Word of the Day, because we talked about how I was a writing person, but now I've become interested in helping a more general population. And the reason for this is because of these things that would happen with Word of the Day. So, when I went to Burning Man, I had all these hysterical people who were coming off of trips and orgies and all kinds of stuff. And they just really were just like not, I understood why Barnaby had his camp, because there was like a line of 300 people every day, right? There were, I think, 20 of us.
Not a ringing endorsement for drugs and sexual promiscuity, is it?
Well, I think as long as you have a place to go afterwards, it's fine, As long as you know where to come down, great.
300 people. I went and had a great time, and I had to get help every step of the way.
Yes. Well, that's what that's again, we're, go back to talk about this personal growth industry and therapy. That's it's supposed to be transformative, not traumatic, but I think that line gets blurred. But anyway, so what happened was, is because I'm also trained, I told you I'm interested in consciousness, the brain, and physicality. So I've studied, I'm certified in Tao Yin, I'm a Reiki master, I'm interested in this stuff. So I had some skills, and I studied Alexander technique. And what I noticed about the people was that their heads were literally not on their shoulders. This is the first part of my understanding something about myself as a healer. I never used this stuff. This is just my, like a hobby, if you like. And I suddenly realized that I had this hysterical woman who weighed about 200 pounds, who had just thrown herself in my arms. I'm 5'2" and I weigh about 100 pounds soaking wet. So someone throwing themselves in your arms was a big deal. So I'm like, what am I going to do with this, gorgeous hunk of womanhood? So I sat her down and I thought, oh my God, all these people have rattles, shamans, they got rattles and sage and invocations, and I have this little notebook, my little notebook with my circles on it. So I thought, no, that's not going to work. And so I was able to use my Alexander techniques that I'd learned to literally get people's heads back on their shoulders. And the power of metaphor, right? You're a writer. Because I was a writer and I had a sense of humor, I laughed and I said, yes, let me get their heads back on their shoulders, but literally, right? And so after this first person calmed down, we did a Word of the Day, and her word was betrayed. And what we discovered, this is all like in 20 minutes, was that, she'd come there with her best friend and her boyfriend, and the boyfriend had immediately slept with the girlfriend. And now they were stuck on the playa in this little camp for 2 weeks. And I'm like, wow, that's really a bad problem. And I was, working on her neck, and she left. And I went, what's funny? And she said, well, those circles, in those words on the circle, I wrote the word dad. And I just realized while you were working on my neck that my dad did this to my mother. And that's why this is happening here, because I'm in a place of transformation. Saw her at a party a week later. She was with some other guy, 2 guys, very juiced up, looking fantastic. And I said, what happened? She said, well, I threw them both out. And I'm reborn. So, for a writing teacher, that was a pretty, and I probably worked with 25 or 30 people during that time. And I think she was my most splashy case, also my first, but I think that I was surprisingly to myself very effective. And so when I left, I'm like, okay, so that's interesting. So then I get back and I meet this guy who was a Freudian psychoanalyst from Argentina, who's working as a social worker while he's getting his license. Meet him at a party. And he says, so, what are you up to? And I show him the self-hug and we do a little thing. And he is a new social worker. He's working for a non-for-profit that helps battered women who will not leave their abusive husbands. So they give him the worst case because he's the new guy. She's been married to this military psycho, ex-military psycho. She's got a 7-year-old son. She's black and blue, the whole 9 yards. And I don't know what possessed him because he's a classically trained Freudian psychoanalyst. He does the self-hug with this woman, and she starts crying. And he does it again. She keeps crying. They have their session. Then he does it at the end a couple of times. This woman, who no one could get to leave her husband for 15 years, calls him the next day and says, I'm at the police station getting my restraining order. Can you come over and help me? And she moved out in the shelter with her son. Okay. So that makes me cry because it's like, 1,000 writers is not worth one regular person. You know that. And so I'm doing some blogs on the weekend, and I get a text from him saying, and sending a picture and saying, I'm in the police station with her. The guy's still coming after her, but she is getting 2 new orders of protection. 3 months later, I think this stuff that you do worked. So that was, again, an experience like Burning Man that dramatized that, there was something going on here that was beyond the writing scale.
It actually hit some part of her, whatever happened, where she was able to make a change that was previously impossible. And you wonder, because it's not cognitive, it's not just knowledge, like, oh, this is a bad guy for me, but I'm going to go back anyway. He said he was sorry.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And I did do a couple of things that.
It was my fault. Yeah.
Oh man. See, I love that you can use this for other things for, like you're saying, more of the general population than just creative.
Can I tell you two more quick stories?
I love stories. That's my favorite thing.
Well, that's what we do. It's what we do, right? Around a campfire somewhere.
Love it. Because that's the way it's like the difference between reading music, which I can't do, and listening to it, which I can do.
I love that analogy. That's a really great analogy. So, all right. So the same psychoanalyst had a weight problem, and he was working very hard, making a new life for himself or whatever. And I have these techniques that I've used for 20 years to get a lot of my students to lose weight, because that's one of the things that impedes writing, because people overeat and they have all kinds of traumas about their weight. So I figured out early that I just had to get rid of them. And I have a series of, I guess you'd call them hacks, which help people think about food so differently they stop overeating. And I was able to help him with some of these hacks, and that'll be in a future book. And at the end of it, he said, Marilyn, I'll send you a testimonial. You have cured in 3 months what took me 14 years of therapy couldn't cure. I don't overeat. And it was from doing Word of the Day. He does it every day. And also these hacks about how to think about that stuff. So that's another story. And then the final story, which has still got me completely mind blown, is when I go upstate to visit my friends, there's a big Goodwill store. And for some reason, I always get the best books there. I'm a ferocious reader, so I'll go and buy 4 or 5 books, and 99 cents is a great budget for me. So I have a stack of books, and I'm checking out, and my friend Paula goes, so Marilyn, why'd you buy these books? And there's a very attractive, Black woman behind the counter, doing the register. And I say, I bought this book for this book for that, this book. And then I pick up this book, which is about Howard Gardner's 8 Kinds of Intelligence. He wrote a book called Frames of Mind, an awesome book. This one was about kids. And she said, why did you buy a book about kids? And I said, because I'm still dealing with the trauma of my childhood and my mother. And I would really like to get over it before I die. And I've had this idea that I should educate that inner child part of me with some new information so that I can get off these old thinking tracks, that maybe I've got to educate that part. This woman behind the counter starts to cry. She grabs my arm and she says, I need this. I need this. And I said, well, what was wrong with your mother? And she said, my mother's a whore and a heroin addict. And I have to deal with this every day. What can I do? And I just said, it's over. You can't fix it. And then she started to cry. And I'm going to start to cry. This happened on Sunday. And we just stood there and she said, thank you. I really needed this. I have 4 daughters and I'm trying to be a good mother to them. And clearly, this was not just the word of the day. It was something that's happened to me where I'm able to have people have a transformative experience, but from the writing modality, change their story, with that lingo. But clearly it had never occurred to her that she didn't have to do this every day.
What I'm getting is just listening to you right now. And my wife has this quality that people tell her things, and I think they have never told anybody else.
Yes.
I think that happens with you. Well, it just did. You just told me the story. You're a person that people feel safe to tell this to. And I think a lot of times people, they're so scared to tell the truth because what's going to happen to me if I get vulnerable enough to do that? I mean, I guess the sort of visceral response is I'll be destroyed. People will use that, see it as weakness and hurt me in some way, and it'll be worse. But the desperation to have to get that out and the safety of going, oh, well, I can make a connection with somebody. I've seen it with my wife so many times, and
Well, your wife sounds like an amazing person.
yeah. I mean, she is. I mean, that's just one of the things I've always been fascinated about her. I don't tell her shit.
Very wise. I wouldn't either. She might use it against you.
Use it against me. What am I going to do? I mean, I live with her. She is one of those people. People just she'll be in a store and talking to somebody, and they'll go, "Oh, I just moved here, and these 3 people died, and I don't have a place to live." Not that they're hitting her up for anything other than just connection.
That's amazing. I never think of myself as being this sort of person, but I seem to have become this person. And, again, I have a sense of, of mission or purpose. I have I've always had a feeling that there was some reason why, I had the childhood I had and why I survived and why I thrived and why I was able to, invent this writing method that helped so many people. And then, these other things that I've done. So, but the thing that was interesting about this person who Hazel, who I think her name was Hazel, across the counter, was she said, and this is what twists me about what I'm up to. She goes, I just keep thinking that if I hadn't been a girl, if I'd been pretty, and my heart is just going, and I'm going, that's, and this is my beef with therapy. Because I was in it for 7 years. I said, that's a myth. You can't change it. It has nothing to do with you. And that's what you have to stop obsessing with. So my sort of thing is, having navigated, the whole self-esteem thing and the whole therapy thing, I moved into this other place where I'm like, no, it's really between your ears. This is the toaster room, which I said we're all like little toasters, and we're looking for a place to plug in to get our juice, right? We think it's other people, it's ourselves. And so the acceptance, it's all about self-acceptance. If you can accept the fact that you can't fix anything that happened, which is really painful, because the alternative, and this is the thing about trauma, you see, kids blame themselves. It's what exactly what you're saying to me 5 minutes ago. If only I'd been this, or that, it wouldn't have been so bad. And the answer is no, it had nothing to do with you. You were completely powerless, bad timing, whatever you want to call it. And that's harder for people to accept than in some way they had, some agency there. This gal didn't have the agency. She was just, born into this terrible situation.
Well, that sort of, I guess it's a little frightening to be a victim of randomness of situation. Maybe that's what it is. Like, if I could have changed it, maybe, there's some, even though it's false, there's a sense of maybe there's some power there that I wasn't able to grasp onto.
Well, but that's what we were talking about, that storytelling. So what Word of the Day does, I'm sorry, I think I interrupted you. If I did, I'm sorry.
You didn't.
Okay. So then the point is that what Word of the Day is it gets right in and then it jams those circuits, you see, because it puts you in a place of, there's no English word really for it, but I could say presentness. In that moment when you were doing the self-hug and you were in the state of presentness where no matter how much your inner critic or your biological imperative wanted to get in there, it couldn't touch you. And that's why it's a powerful technique. That's why I said, I'm going to say, maybe try it tomorrow morning and see if what happens with your name isn't a lot more than has ever happened before, even if you don't write it down.
Okay.
Because you didn't physically write it down with us. We did it in the air. It was air writing, right?
Yeah, sure.
But so I think that's the most important thing, is people have to understand that trauma occurs in a place where there's no language. And that this is so important, that self-acceptance comes once you understand that it's not this positive thinking shit. It's more like an arranged marriage. It's not, I have a love affair with myself. It's more like, oh, you again. But the point is, that's when you look in the mirror, there is someone. And one of my techniques for 25 years working with writers, myself included, is I have a mirror on my desk, and it's not for me to figure out how much Botox I need or whatever. See, it's my mirror. It's like an artist's mirror.
Mm-hmm.
But I look over there every so often. I go, hi, because there's someone in the mirror. And this has been one of my most powerful hacks of getting people to not be suicidal, to get their work done, because they're not alone. And when you did the self-hug, you were pulling on a part of yourself that you're never alone, but you don't think to access it.
I mean, I know people that have hugged themselves in front of a mirror and said, I love you. And they start weeping. I mean,
Yes.
it's like they don't think they deserve it, or they do think they deserve it, but they've been afraid of it. It's just, I've had a number of people tell me that. Like the first time I did that was so, I couldn't do it. I actually couldn't do it. You hear that sometimes too. There was something somebody said to me a long time ago that was, and I didn't understand it when they said it because I was complaining about something from my past. I don't remember the specifics because that's how important it is. So, and they said, "Oh, you know that you're not your story." And I go, "What? What do you mean? That's who I am. It's the events that happened to me are my story."
Yeah.
Go, well, they go, "Yeah, but that's your story. That's not you." And I'm like, "What are you?" And it took me quite a while to kind of understand that essence that's underneath there, that person that's being hugged and tapping into that intuition or whatever you want to call it. That's me. The events and the things that happen, yes, it influences a lot, but it's not that sort of vibrating life force.
It's up to you. In other words, so part of the reason that I bought the book about these different kinds of intelligence and how you need to teach children is because I have been working with this. In other words, part of my self-acceptance is to say, wow, my mother's been dead for 14 years, but the whole issue is not dead. I'm still trying to change something that I can't change. That awareness I got from doing the word of the day. I mean, I know I couldn't have owned it. I would have been too embarrassed that I was still doing, right? After all this therapy, everything, I'm still dealing with this issue, right? But the word of the day gives you a sense of, oh, great, I can express this. It can be part of my, it is something that's going on with me. I'm not having an argument with it anymore. I'm not pretending it's not true. That's where I'm going with this. And so the idea of the self-hug every morning, and then you do a little creative work, the 1 minute, free association, and then you do another little cluster and you write something about it, creates a protocol which retrains your mind and your brain in a way that I've never seen anything else work.
Well, that's the beauty of the idea that you can retrain yourself.
Thing is pathologized. In other words, even saying you're not your story is a form of pathologizing an experience. And my whole thing with Word of the Day and this other work that I do, and one of the reasons I've been very successful as both a writer and a coach, I have my third novel is coming out next year, is this ability to kind of go into that spot and just go, okay, in order to get the work done, I have to be in some place where my attention is not being diverted by some albatross I'm carrying forward from the past. It may be there, but I've got to be able to set it aside. And so part of the work that I've done for a long time is to figure out why therapy, people keep going to therapy. And I went for 17 years, so it was a real question. I'm sure I paid for at least 2 therapist retirements.
They like that because they want to make money. They like keeping you. They like having you come back.
Right, but that pissed me off, and it was the same thing with all this personal stuff. Yeah. I mean, after I read my 14th book by some guru, I was like, you know what? There's something going on here. So I'm going to share the secret. This is what I discovered. And this is the drum roll, okay, Bob, which is that people say, oh, they're all different kinds of happiness, and the answer is no. That is marketing BS. There's only one thing that we need to be happy, drum roll, and that is our own self-acceptance. That's it. So that self-hug puts you there without having a conversation about what you need to do. So when you do the self-hug, you know what that feels like. If you're not crazy, you want to feel like that a lot. And that's the true meaning of happiness. And if the happiness does not come from without, it doesn't come from within. It comes from this feedback loop that you create with yourself and you maintain. And that's, everybody wants the same thing. Now, what I call that is being received. You receive yourself. And that's what's new about what I'm up to. In other words, the idea that every morning you wake up and you receive yourself, warts and all, you're crazy, pernicious, whatever you're up to, and that you then start from that place, you're untouchable.
I keep putting the word albatross that you used with pernicious. Keep
Well, that's a pretty good description of trauma.
Yeah.
A precious albatross that you can't get rid of.
Yeah.
See, that came out of our creative work. In other words, who would have ever put those two words together?
Let me give you the P.O. box to send the check, folks.
But a prodigious albatross. You see what I mean? That's such an original and creative thing that you did.
I could feel the weight of it around my neck and like sort of banging into my chest when I was thinking it. Like, ugh. I had a friend, he had this noise that he would make when something was, and it said everything about his personality. He was very disappointed in humanity and foolhardy behavior. And he had a comedic take on it also. And the sound he would make is, every time he did it, I would laugh because I knew exactly what he was thinking.
Right.
You tell him something, you go, such a wonderful person.
Wife and your friends, you seem like a very blessed person.
You know what? I am a blessed person. I've tried to weed out the things that don't work and add in the things that do. It makes for a nice, simple, blessed existence most of the time. I don't run into a lot of problems like I used to as a chaotic youth. I think I'll go over here and hang out with these troublemakers. Hey, what happened? I just got hurt. I don't know why I want to ask you this. Do you have siblings?
Yes.
Okay. I was just wondering if they had a similar experience childhood-wise than you, or was yours unique? And if you don't want to talk about it, I'm cool with that too.
The short answer is no. I had a particularly terrible childhood.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry to hear that.
And I'm very happy that they did not have to experience it.
Okay.
You know,
I always wonder about families because, I have a sibling and I also have 3 children. So, and we're all different. All my kids are different than each other. And, obviously there's some stuff that's similar because they grew up in the same house with the same parents, but they're so different. And
your relationships are so different. And when you had them were so different. Yeah. I mean,
it's fascinating, right? Because, so you meet somebody and they go, well, this is my brother. And you go, well, that person's nothing like you. Well, what makes you think that they're supposed to be?
Exactly. It's that assumption, some kind of familial. Well, there's a wonderful psychiatrist from the 70s. His name is R.D. Laing. And he wrote a book that was very influential called Sanity and Madness in the Family. And it was the first book that, without pulling any punches, posited that sometimes children are scapegoated in family structures because someone's got to be the crazy one or whatever, so everybody else can be sane. And without going into detail or making anybody feel bad or anything, that was exactly what occurred in my life. And because I was smart enough to get that really young, I was able to survive and thrive. And I have no hard feelings. But I'm saying, if you survive something like that, then it changes your framework. And one of experience, it's not related to this, but I've had a lot of very interesting experiences in my life. Like you, I've hung out with a lot of the wrong people in a lot of the wrong places, and so on and so forth. And I had a near-death experience, and after I didn't die, I died and I came back. Actually, I was dead for 2 minutes. I kind of went, you know what? I died and I was still myself beyond the grave. I'm cracking jokes. I die and I'm swimming in this underground cavern, and I think to myself, hey, no one from my family's here. Great. And I'm dead. I mean, I'm aware that I died and I'm floating in this water, but I still had my sense of humor. So I've been able to also be helpful to a lot of people that way because I know that you're still you on the other side, whatever that means. And I think that that's an important part of again, self-acceptance and being creative, which is that these things that we're brainwashed to fear, rejection, someone might not like it, what you said earlier, these are not us. And one of the things that Words of the Day can do, if you wanted to, is to start to let you see what you are and what you aren't. And that's powerful because a lot of people, Isaac Dinesen, the famous author, said anybody who's had a childhood has a novel.
Yeah.
And that even people who have loving, wonderful parents still have stories, still have events that happen. There's always that bully at the school or, there's always something. You don't need much to upset a little child.
You don't. No, you don't. what is it? It only takes a second to screw up the Mona Lisa with a can of spray paint. It only takes a
My
second.
point exactly.
Um,
So what the word of the day does with intention is the way that you pick this thing out of your brain, because it's a part of you that's like your stronger self. It works in ways that can't. In other words, you want to call on your spirit guides or intuition or whatever. That's fine. This works faster because this is going to get you right into the thing that you're up to that day. Whatever you're doing, and it's a way of really starting to sort out what your true identity is, because you start to hear this stuff is not yours. I don't really think that.
yeah.
I don't really believe that. Wow, where did I get these ridiculous expectations? I don't have them.
It's a funny expression. You hear people say, well, that's just what you do. Well, who made that decision?
That's not true. Exactly.
No,
I love what you just said, Bob. Exactly. That's not true.
Yeah. It's like, well, that's what you do. That's what there is, that meaning there's some authority that's deciding what people do, or need to do, should do, have to do. Who is this authority? It's this amorphous kind of a blob of a perception of what society is saying is okay
Right.
in someone's mind. But it can be sort of a group think kind of an idea. It's where I really saw it was when my kids were little and other parents were saying, are you doing this? Are you doing this? Are you doing this? Are you doing, this is what you do. They used to have a thing called, what was the word? I couldn't stand it. Enrichment. What the fuck is enrichment? You got to put a kid in a class of some type for enrichment, and they're 4,
Right. Right.
And I'm like, what? Why would I do that? Well, that's what you do. You want them to get into a good middle school. I go, do I? I mean, there were like parents going like, have you picked out a nursery school for your baby yet? Because it's very competitive. There's a waiting list. I'm like, well, what did you just fall for? I mean, come on, you're an idiot. But people were doing it, and I'm thinking like, wow. I mean, these are little babies that should be, gurgling in their crib and eating and playing and laying on their parents' stomachs and laughing.
Yeah, exactly.
Not being groomed for a nursery school.
For a nursery school.
Yeah, I mean that's the type of insanity. I mean, and that pervades all the way up the age chart.
Sure.
And that's what you do. I mean, how you can't dress like that. You're this age now. You can't do that. Well, but I can do that if I want to do that. Why can't I? What's going to happen? You're going to be uncomfortable. My daughter was dating this guy, and he said, "You're too independent." And I'm thinking, like, for who? Who is she too independent for him? Obviously, but that's it.
Right.
That's it. One guy. They're not together, so that's the good news.
That's good news.
Yeah. Get rid of this asshole. That's my parental advice.
That's very, 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 very sagely expressed and very graphically expressed.
Well, Marilyn, I got a little worked up about that, but it was fun. I like that.
No, but the point is you deserve to get worked up because children are being robbed of their childhood.
Thank you for saying that. That is true. In many cases, folks, don't let your children be robbed of their childhood.
And don't let your friends, browbeat you into doing things that are wrong.
Yeah. And they're wrong for you. It doesn't mean they're wrong for them, but they probably are.
Well, but you're in a rock and a hard place, because if you don't do them and the kid doesn't get into school, then the kid doesn't have the advantage. It's a more complicated conversation, because you also have to, when you have children, it does all kinds of different things to you, right?
I know it's mine are grown out of the house. I don't have to think about it anymore. That part of it anyway.
That's nice. You can just relax and enjoy your empty nest.
Oh, I love it. I have to say, that's part of the blessed life I have. Love you. See you around. Okay.
I agree. So just back to
Yes.
what I wanted to say is that the key takeaways from this conversation are, first of all, you and I are very like-minded, and I feel honored to know you. You're really awake person,
Back at you, Marilyn.
much appreciated. And that the person that you're seeking to find is yourself, right? But the problem is you have to find a way to make yourself feel worthy. You got to do something, and that's my beef with all this stuff. So the word of the day is something that you can do to prove to yourself that you are worthy of happiness. You see?
Mm. I do see.
And so I'm really up to, and in my fantasy of what happens is, in 5 years when someone goes on a dating site, they don't talk about stuff. They go, "What was your word of the day?"
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Boom. And you meet someone, instead of talking about the weather, you say, "Oh, I haven't seen you for 6 months. What was your word of the day?" And you're off, remembering the time you did this and you're doing that. And you're in the same way that you did the self-hug. Try that for a few days. You'll see that people will start to connect with you. And you live with someone who obviously has that capacity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it changes. And the idea is that if everybody could start to do this with themselves, you stop being able to do things like be evil or make war, because you just can't. Because you accept yourself, you're receiving yourself, you're giving yourself a thing that no one will give you.
Well, a world of people that like themselves would be the most magical thing ever.
How about that?
Wouldn't that be great? And the way to do that is go to MarilynHorowitz.com.
Yes, I'll 5 minutes.
Did you like that? How I just sort of slid right into the commercial like that?
That was great. Give me a couple of years, because I'm making all these companion books, for using the word day, like as a companion book that you can use for relationships. That's sort of my next projects. And I have something else that I'm working on that since we've got along so when it's ready, I'll circle back and see if it's something you'd be interested in talking about.
I'm already interested.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah.
But the big takeaway is don't listen to anybody else. There's only one true definition of happiness, and that is finding a way for you to feel that you are worthy of having it. That's it. Everything else is marketing.
I have nothing else to add to that. That's how blown away I am by that statement. Thank you so much for being on the program. I really is it a program? It's a show. It's a podcast. I don't know what it is, but thank you for being here. It's been an absolute delight speaking with you. And folks, MarilynHorowitz.com is where you can find books, videos, words of the day, everything that you would ever want to know about Marilyn Horowitz and her oeuvre.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And again, the only thing I would like to really say to people is, it's between you and you.
Much appreciation for you folks listening to The Exploding Human. If you want to check out the website, that is theexplodinghuman.com. There is a YouTube channel where you can listen. That is The Exploding Human with Bob Nickman. Once again, I want to thank Marilyn Horowitz for being on the program. Please check her out at marilynhorowitz.com. You guys have a fantastic day. Thank you.